can't do this. This is bullshit. This movie was terrible. It fucking sucked, man. Was it really that bad? Yeah, it was that bad. It was terrible. Like, who wants to see this shit? Not me. Well, I actually did it. I did what I said I was not going to do. I watched the new 2016 Ghostbusters movie with Melissa McCarthy. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As I stated in the intro, I did recently watch the new 2016 Ghostbusters movie. A little bit of backstory on how this happened. I recently acquired the 4K TV, and while looking on eBay to try to find the cheapest 4K Blu-ray I could, the cheapest one turned out to be Ghostbusters. It was 99 cents with free shipping. So I figured, what the hell, you know, a lot of the anger, a lot of the worry had died down now. The movie's been out. Most of the normal people's already put the reviews on it and either praised it or knocked it or talked about how terrible it was. And I figured, you know, I initially said I was not gonna do it. But then I thought, well, maybe if I go into it with an open mind, possibly, you know, what's it gonna hurt? During the time I was waiting to get the movie in, I thought about it a lot, and I figured, you know, it might not be such a bad thing. If you have not already seen my previous video on the Ghostbusters reboot, you can click up here and give that a look. It basically talks about how Ghostbusters was a big part of my childhood and how I was terrified this movie was just going to destroy everything that was previously established and built. Now to get into the review. I don't hate this movie as much as I thought that I would. Am I glad I didn't pay full price? Yes. Now with that said, I'm really concerned about some aspects of the movie and other things I'm willing to forgive. It's one of those situations where you kind of got to deal with the fact that it did get made. It has been released. It made what it was going to make. The controversy's been out. You can either accept it or you're just going to have to get over it. There's no two ways about it. It is what it is. We'll start off with what I believe was the good parts, or what I thought were the better parts of a subpar movie. In the previews, I thought I was going to hate Leslie Jones's character, Patty, when in fact it turned out she was probably my favorite character. I liked the dynamic she played. She wasn't trying to overdo it as much as they made it look like she was in the previews. She wasn't trying to one-up the other actors the whole time. I really feel like she tried to take this role a little bit more serious than the other people did. I really believe the other actresses in this have that superstar mentality from being used to being comics on like SNL and stuff, and basically believe that no matter what they said or how they acted or how they ad-libbed, it was going to be comedy gold and that people were going to pay to see it regardless. And I really feel like she tried a lot harder with the way she delivered her lines, the way she tried to portray herself and a New Yorker concerned. Now the script probably wasn't much to work with from what I've seen online, what I've watched other YouTubers say. Now I'm trying to keep my opinion separate from theirs and not really try to think about anything that I've watched before, but most of them are right when it comes down to it. And a lot of people are more passionate about certain properties than others. Again, in the video I put out before, you know, Ghostbusters was a huge part of my childhood. I really believe it was the first movie I ever saw. The cartoon was huge for me, the toys, everything. I still have costumes now that I have for Ghostbusters with my name on it. It's been a big part of my life forever, you know, since I was born. So some of the other parts that I actually enjoyed that I'd say was on the positive side, There was some jokes that weren't in the previews. I was afraid that the previews spoiled all the decent jokes in this movie, but there was some parts that I legitimately chuckled at. They're so forgettable I can't even think of one on hand right now, but I did. There was a couple times in there I was like, oh, that's actually kind of funny. But there was a lot of stuff that fell flat on its face. The things that annoyed me the most with the movie, Kristen Wiig's character just seemed like she didn't know what to do with herself. Didn't even seem like a believable scientist. Didn't seem like she knew anything. She seemed extremely odd. There was no basis in reality for these characters. Even Bill Murray, that was known for comedy, actually kind of came off as believable by his portrayal as Peter Venkman in the original movie. There's just not a lot here to work with when you're actually trying to believe that these people could do what they say they could do. Now, Kate McKinnon's character, she kind of played it correctly with the whole Egon-ish type character where she was making all of their equipment and the technology and stuff. But it was just really weird because either there's a lot of time skips that nobody knows about, because this whole movie feels like it could have been done, like it was like within 3 or 4 days of itself. But like they go bust a ghost, come back, and she's like, oh yeah, well I've already created this, and this is going to make it smaller, and this is going to make their equipment run better. And it's like, when have you had time to even like advance that stuff? This makes no sense. Like, you just got back, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, I can make, I got these little pistols, and I got this, and this, and I mean stuff that it seems like would take weeks to months to come up with. All of a sudden, she's just randomly like, oh, I figured out how to make the nuclear particles do this. I don't know, but there's a lot of unbelievable stuff inside of it. There's a lot of stuff inside the movie itself that just doesn't make sense. They kind of poke fun at the original. They pay homage to the original. The villain in this movie was very lackluster. I didn't really buy his whole motive for anything, his understanding of what he was getting himself into. There was no backstory. There was no ancient Sumerian that passed down. I don't know. It just seemed like it just seemed like the script was just there to pull stuff out of its ass. Let's copy what we want to of the original. Let's try to put the women in. Let's try to do this. Let's try to do that. I watched this whole movie, and honest to God, I can honestly say, and I said this before, like, I didn't mind the whole female Ghostbuster thing. I did mind how dumb they made like every dude in the movie. The like Chris Hemsworth character was just like over the top dumb. That it made no sense. Like, that part made no sense, and it like crossed that line for me to where it was like, all right, this isn't funny. This is just like stupid. There's other parts of the movie that, like, the government knew about the ghosts and they wanted them to keep it quiet, but they could continue their work. But anything they found out, they needed to call. It's like stuff like that I don't even think needed to actually get put in. From what I understand, I watched the extended edition, the extended cut on the Blu-ray, which had some stuff added to it that wasn't in the theatrical release. Way too much dancing in this movie. The whole dance number with the disco stuff and all that I thought was just uncalled for. It took away from the pacing of the movie. And like the last thing I want, in that third act, like when they're setting up for whatever's going on, is to like cut to like a 4-minute dance sequence that like has no need to be in the story whatsoever. They never really explain a lot of the stuff that goes on in the movie. I guess they just expect that everybody knows what Ghostbusters is nowadays, and we'll just kind of throw this at them and they'll buy it. They tried to use some of the same lingo that Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis created, but different ways. I found the use of some of the stuff that they were trying to stay close to the source material to be extremely awkward. I guess that's the best word I can find for that, is awkward. A lot of it was awkward. If you're a new person that's never seen Ghostbusters or were a fan and this is your first introduction to it, I have no idea what your perception of everything is. I guess you're either going to think it was pretty cool or you're going to think it was totally stupid. I hope that you don't believe that this is what Ghostbusters is as a whole, and know that this is just one interpretation of Ghostbusters. If you haven't seen the originals, I implore you to go to watch those. for 30 years, 32 years old. They still hold up. I don't believe this movie will hold up as long as the original has. I do believe the original one's still relevant. I caught on early enough in the movie that they were kind of going through the same motions as they did in the original to kind of try to keep that kind of pacing. And from the previews, you already knew there was going to be the big Stay Puft looking guy. It turns out to be the No Ghost logo that turned into a cartoon originally and then grew to be huge and somehow turned into Boogie Woogie off of The Nightmare Before Christmas. That's what he looked like to me. I kept up with all the stuff that was being said on the internet about how like it was man bashing and they shot him in the dick and all this kind of stuff. And I was able to look past some of that. I mean, there's only when something's this big, I'm guessing that's probably the easiest thing to aim for. Trying to be optimistic and say, hey, this could have been the possible reason for that. It might not have been 100% intentional, but it probably was. I don't know. I told myself I wasn't going to do the normal thing I do with movies and look too far into this movie. I think their audience that they were going for is not the reviewers on YouTube, passionate people that do enjoy movies and want to overthink them and do that kind of stuff. I think they were looking for just a regular crowd of people to try to appeal to, that just go to the movies, want an hour or two to be taken away out of their stressful life and then walk away saying, hey, that was fun. And if people walked out and thought that it was fun, that's great, but the numbers from the movie don't show that it was appealing enough, or word of mouth, and I mean, it tanked. I want Ghostbusters to be relevant again so bad. I really do. I want this to be like bigger than the comic book stuff. I'd love to know every few years we had like different Ghostbusters movies or different cities, different branches. I wish that they would have had it to where like Ghostbusters was already established, or maybe have it to where these were the daughters or nieces of the actual Ghostbusters from before, and then something happened and they found the equipment, or they grew up knowing about it and then they decided they had to do something. I don't know. I think there was a lot more potential, especially with the story, than there was portrayed through whatever script they were given. I don't know if there was rewrites. I don't know if it was more they tried to appease the actors or whatnot, but a lot of this movie, again, I'm going back to the word awkward. It just didn't seem believable. It didn't seem like these people would even mesh the way that they tried to portray that they did. And the movie's what it was. Do I feel like I want my 2 hours back? Not really. In hindsight, I'm glad I finally watched it. If this movie had to be made to bring Ghostbusters back to being relevant and fail the way it did, for Sony to say, we need a better team, a better director, a better script, but we want to turn this into an actual legitimate franchise again, then I can understand this movie's place and I can accept it. Now, moving forward, if they don't try to correct this mistake and try to take it more serious, that's when I'm going to be even more upset than I was about the idea of this movie. I don't believe this movie was a terrible movie. It was a subpar movie that if they would have named it something different, I think could have found its audience. But because you attached it to something that was already established and took lore from it and turned it upside down, I honestly believe that that's where you failed. This could have been a great movie. This could have reinvigorated and brought back something from the 80s that was a big deal and could have made you a lot of money. Unfortunately, you put it in the hands of the wrong people, the wrong talent, and I don't even blame all of the cast. I don't even blame Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, any of them. They were offered money to play a role, and they had a director that said, I like what you're doing, keep doing that. They've all expressed that they were fans of the series, fans of the property, and they might have done the best they could. And it's not their fault. We shouldn't blame them. You should blame the people at Sony and allow this monstrosity to continue even after the chaos ensued and the controversy happened. There's a lot of things that could have been better, but there could have been a lot worse. I was really afraid that if I ever watched this movie, that all I was going to do is bash it and have negative things to say about it. And I'm glad that I'm not in that position. There was a lot of unnecessary humor. There was a lot of unnecessary things that happened altogether in this movie. But again, it could have been worse. I'm hoping for a brighter future for this property, and I'm hoping this kick-started at least the interest and showed that people cared enough that if done right, we might actually have a legitimate Ghostbusters franchise, universe, and a good movie again. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. Leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of the movie, and I'll catch you in the next one.